my name is Wendy Gillet, and today I will be presenting on the article, The Music of Speech, Music Training Facilitates Pitch Processing in Both Music and Language. This experiment was done by Daniel Schoen, Cyril Meng, and Muriel Besson. So I first encountered this article last semester in the spring while taking Brain and Language. At the end of the semester, we were required to do a big group presentation, and our group decided to look at pitch perception and whether or not there was another variable that allowed a person to understand pitch better and more effectively. So with this current study, it highlights the recent development of brain imaging techniques and offers new possibilities to test the hypothesis that intensive musical training influences performance in other cognitive domains. Both behavioral and ERP measures were used in the present study to compare musicians and non-musicians while they perform the same task in music and language. The first aim of this study was to determine whether musical training influences pitch processing in language. The second aim directly compares pitch perception in language and music by recording the variations in the ERPs associated with different degrees of fundamental frequency. So in this study, there were 18 participants, 9 of which were musicians. All were paid to participate, all were right-handed, which I thought was kind of interesting. All had normal hearing and were native speakers of French. The experiment lasted 2 hours and was done so in a soundproof room. The materials used for this experiment were 120 French-spoken declarative sentences and 120 melodies. So there were 3 experimental conditions, with using the final word or note being prosodically or melodically congruence, weakly congruence, or strongly incongruence. So the 3 congruence were the 3 conditions. During the blocks of trials, participants were required to listen to sentences, then decide quickly and accurately as possible by pressing 1 or 2 response keys whether the pitch of the last word or note was correct or not. The ERP readings were done so using EEG recordings during the study. These were recorded from 28 scalp electrodes, which were mounted on an elastic cap and located at standard left and right hemisphere positions over different areas of the brain. The data was then referenced offline into an algebraic average of left and right mastoids. These ERP readings were used to determine if different parts of the brain were used differently in musicians and non-musicians. So there were a couple different ANOVAs ran with this study. So the ANOVAs were used for all statistical tests, and all p-values reported were adjusted to the Greenhouse-Geyser epsilon correction for non-sphericity. Factors included with these ANOVAs were, with the first one, congruity and electrodes for midline analysis, and then for the second one, hemisphere, anterior, posterior dimension, frontocentral, temporal, and electrodes for lateral analysis. So there were 3 different results calculated from this study, the first of which were from the error rates. So there was a 3-way ANOVA on the transform percentages of error showed that main effects of expertise and congruity. So for non-musicians, they made overall more errors than musicians. Musicians detected the weak incongruity better than non-musicians, not only in music but in language too. So the second formal results were the reaction times. So an ANOVA showed no main effect, but significantly faster RTs with the linguistic rather than the musical materials. Musicians detected weak incongruities faster than congruence endings in music as well as in language. And then there were also no significant differences found for non-musicians, either in music or in language. So the last set of results that were collected were the electrophysiological data. So with this, they divided it into 2 subgroups with music and language. So for music, for musicians, the onset latency of the positivity was 100 milliseconds shorter for the strong incongruity than for the weak incongruity. There was no relationship found for non-musicians because there was no significant difference between the weak incongruity, and the congruence known in any of the latency bands considered for analysis. Both musicians and non-musicians' strong incongruities elicited a larger negative component than congruence and weakly incongruence endings. So then moving on to the language aspect of that, for musicians, the onset latency of the positivity was 15 milliseconds shorter for the strong than the weak incongruities. Non-musicians also showed larger positivities to strong and weak incongruities than to congruence words. So overall, the results showed that for musicians, the negativity was largest over temporal sites bilaterally, and then for non-musicians, it was largest over left temporal sites. Both musicians and non-musicians showed larger positivities to strong incongruities than to congruence endings in both music and language. So to kind of wrap up everything that I just talked about, musicians and non-musicians perform the same task with detection of pitch contour violations in both music and language to determine whether extensive musical training influences behavior and ERP is not only in music but also in language. The ERP and reaction time data shows that musical expertise influences pitch processing network, facilitates the detection of pitch changes not only in music but in language as well. And lastly, the current experience hypothesis was supported based on the data provided throughout the entire article. So, in conclusion, this article was influential to me because it allowed me to look at music and language in a different way. Before reading this article, I would have never thought that music training would have this big of an effect on pitch perception. Pitch perception can be the difference in how one reacts to certain situations, and I believe that this could be a good quality to have in everyday life. Thank you.